Great, I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. My name is Greg Hess. I'm from the class of '89, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. In particular, it's a pleasure because one of my classmates, Tom Bostick, will be one of our speakers, speaking about Hurricane Sandy and more broadly, I think, about some climate change issues. Tom was really my best experience in terms of brushing shoulders with our colleagues in the military. To me, he's the epitome of someone who's not only a scholar from West Point, but also the classic scholar warrior, having been in the field and having distinguished himself in many, many ways. So it's great to know Tom personally, and I'm looking forward to his talk this afternoon. And then with talk is his colleague as well, Dr. Kate White. Kate, I was surprised to learn already just in chatting for a few moments, that's actually a registered engineer as well. And more importantly, he's been with the Corps for 25 years, a little bit different than the mini bio says in our documents today. And during that time, they've worked on a wide range of issues. We chatted a little bit about them last night, and I'm sure you'll be fascinated to hear about the wide range of issues that the Corps is working on in terms of our environment, our resources, and some of the infrastructure issues today. So let me welcome Tom, and then Kate will add comments as well.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here among fellow fellows. The White House Fellowship year was such a wonderful year for me, but it's been the years afterwards, the fellowship, the education, the opportunities, and really the engagements with many of you in your different life and work and professions. So today's an opportunity for me to talk about the Corps of Engineers and the work that we do for the nation. Janet Abrams had asked me to do this and talked about doing it with Hurricane Sandy in mind. And I thought I'd take a broader look because Hurricane Sandy is really a subset of a broader challenge that we have. I thought I'd show this photo up there. I was going to have Administrator Fugate here, and he's committed and couldn't come. And then I was going to have Dan Poneman, another classmate of ours. He's the Deputy Energy Secretary, but he's in the Middle East. But the real smart one among all of us is Kate White, Dr. White. She's really an expert in climate change. And I know there's some interest in that. I'm going to touch on it a little bit, but I thought I'd make sure that she was here as well. Now, Fugate and I went through some really tough times during the disaster. And there were 3 disasters actually in my first year. I don't know what that says for a chief of engineer is going to be around for 4 years, but 3 disasters. We had Hurricane Isaac, and then we had Superstorm Sandy. And then what a lot of folks don't realize is the drought. And the drought over about 67% of the country caused some significant issues. In fact, the Mississippi was so low that we had these rocks that came up out. We called them the Pinnacle Rocks. And I was in the White House one day, and the president came by and he said, what are you doing here? Because he remembered me from Hurricane Sandy. And I said, we're here. You know, we got this problem on the Mississippi. There's no water. And he goes, yeah, you got to fix that. And I said, I'll get right after it, sir. But it was hard. We blew these rocks out, and it really, the main point I'm going to make here is that we were losing our economy because so much of it flows through the Mississippi. So I'm going to talk about our economy and how dependent we are on it. The other thing I want to do is just talk about my uniform a little bit. A lot of folks understand what the uniform is all about. This is kind of, we went from the green uniform to the blue uniform. But a couple folks have asked me about my engineer castles. So anyone other than Jack LaCure and Robert Marbut know about the castles? Okay, so a few folks are shaking their heads out there. But anyway, I was the XO to the chief engineers years ago, eons ago. Mark, raise your hand. So I had that job. And we were getting ready to go to a conference, something probably like this, and I grabbed his jacket and I put it on. And I said, hey, you know, Chief, I really need to help you with your uniform. And he said, what do you mean? He said, you know, your castles are kind of worn. You know, they're a little bit small. I need to get you a new set of castles. And he said, go read the book on Sverdrup, Leif Sverdrup. You know, today I'd say go, to Google and Google it, but he made me read a book. So anyway, I was embarrassed at the end of that book, and it goes like this. Leif Sverdrup was from a Norwegian. He came to the United States, and then He fought in World War II with the Army, left, and he became this great engineer and built bridges all across the Missouri, did a lot of things, got into the helicopter business, a great engineer. MacArthur asked him to come to the Pacific during World War II. Well, he had this company going. He just didn't want to leave it, but he left it to his wife, said, I'll be back in a few months, and 3 years later almost, he came home. But he served MacArthur in the Pacific, and many of you know MacArthur. When he graduated from West Point, #1 in his class in 1903, his mom stayed in the Hotel Thayer right there on West Point for the 4 years he was there. And then at graduation, his mom and dad wanted to give him something special. So they gave him, he selected Corps of Engineers as his branch, and they gave him a set of gold castles, 14-karat gold castles. And MacArthur, when Sverdrup was leaving to go back home after his 2 years in the Pacific, he said, you know, my mom and dad gave me these at graduation, and I'm not really an engineer. You're a real engineer. I want you to have these, but don't let them end up in a museum. So in 1975, Sverdrup was at one of our engineer balls, and he was not well, and he walked up to the chief engineers, then General Gribble, and he said, hey, MacArthur gave these castles, and he doesn't want them to end up in a museum. So he pinned them on the chief engineers, and these are the castles that I'm wearing. And now, normally I keep these in a vault, but I brought them out just for you because I knew, and that's true. I think we just took them out of the vault today and we put them on, so they look a little bit smaller. And the other thing is, all general officers don't wear, like if you're infantry, you don't see infantry castles. We're generalists, so we can do a lot of different jobs. I was the head of personnel before I came to this job. I was the head of recruiting as a general officer. You don't wear anything on your lapel. But once I became chief of engineers, I was honored and delighted and very humbled to put on MacArthur's castles. Okay, so I'm going to talk about infrastructure. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about the Corps of Engineers because a lot of folks don't know what the Corps does. But we're 2 days younger than the Army itself. So the Army's birthday is 14 June of 1775, and the Corps of Engineers is 16 June 1775. I think we had one guy in the Corps at that time, but that was the birth of the Corps of Engineers. And since then, we've done a number of things throughout this nation that many know about and many don't. I picked out a few things since you're in D.C., but if you look there in the center, the Lincoln Memorial, the Corps built that. The Washington Monument, the Corps built that. And the dome of our Congress, the Corps of Engineers built that. We also built the Pentagon there that you see. We built the Pentagon in 16 months. It was renovated in 16 years. And that's a true story. True story, but you know, there's a lot of regulations and a lot of issues that have been put on us. It takes a little bit longer. But renovations normally take long, but 16 years to renovate that. The Bonneville Dam, that's a public-private partnership. We're real interested in doing that in the future. We don't have many of them. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The Panama Canal was a mission that was given to us, or the president took on after France was not able to complete it. The Kennedy Space Center. And I want to talk about this last picture here. Anybody know what that is? Other than you, Janet? I got to tell you the story. Last year, I'm going to get to my speech here in a minute. But last year, I came to this, and Janet said, "Hey Tom, will you come to the Saturday session at Smithsonian?" Everybody anybody go to that? That was really nice, right? That was good. So when she called, I said I can't come. So she called again, and Janet, being Janet, she called me like 3 or 4 times. I said, "Okay, I'll come." So I'm walking around the Museum of Natural History, and then finally we sit down at a table, and I think Jack LaCure was there, and I think Rubenstein and others, and after lunch he said, "Well, you're probably wondering why we asked you to come here today." I said, "You know, White House Fellows, yeah, I know. No, why we asked you to come here today." He said, "Well, I don't know. Why?" And he said, "Well, we'd like your Tyrannosaurus Rex." I said, "Okay, we build things, we have boats, we do a lot of things, but you want my Tyrannosaurus Rex?" Well, I don't have one at home, you know. And he said, "No, we want the Corps' Tyrannosaurus Rex." So I came back to the headquarters and I said, "Okay, where's it at?" You know. I said, "What? Tyrannosaurus?" Well, our guys at the headquarters had no idea. So anyway, our Northwest Division up in Montana has one of the most complete actual Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's called the Wankel Rex, from Miss Wankel, who found it on Corps property. So we have 2 of them, and we were going to bring one of them down, but the government shutdown caused us not to bring it, because we wanted it here on Fossil Day. I don't know if you know, but the National Fossil Day is on 16 October. That's something else I learned. But we're going to bring it down, I think, in the spring, and there's going to be a nice celebration on the mall, and you'll see Wankel Rex anyway. So who knew? I mean, we're into a lot of stuff. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about is some of the other things that we're involved in. And this is really the grand challenge that I wanted to talk about before I got into Sandy. The American Society of Civil Engineers goes out and they grade a lot of things, and they've graded our infrastructure for many years. So not many of us would raise our hand and admit that we ever liked having a D or a D plus or wanted one, but that's our grade for our infrastructure in the country. And it's really a grade that's been getting worse each year, and we're not investing like we should. You see in the bottom right there, about $3.6 trillion is what we think we need by 2020 to fix the problem that we have. We think we're going to have about $2 trillion, so we're going to be $1.5 trillion plus short. And we don't know where that's going to come from, but we know that this infrastructure is going to continue to age, and it's important that we understand what that infrastructure does for us. I'm just going to talk about some of that infrastructure. I'm going to talk about the water-related infrastructure today, because that's really our core competency. That's what we do, not only throughout the United States, but we're engaged in it in 130 different countries around the world. The Corps of Engineers, many do not realize, I have a lot of military help here, but the Corps of Engineers has 37,000 people and only 600 military. So it's mostly a civilian organization. They're mostly very bright engineers, scientists, and folks like Dr. Kate White that do wonderful things for this country. So that's the challenge that we have. If you look at the inland waterways and think about what it does, if you take one barge is the equivalent of 16 rail cars. But John Orson, you probably knew that, being a railroad guy. You know, it's 70 semi-trailers. So when you think about what moving just a barge down the Mississippi versus railroad, and I'm not saying don't use the railroad, because you got to use a combination of everything, or 70 semi-trailers, we need that barge traffic. The president in August of 2012 came out with a We Can't Wait strategy, and that We Can't Wait strategy included 5 ports that he said this country needed to prepare for the post-Panamax ships. These are the big barges that are going to come in after Panama finishes the canal upgrades, and they're going to come into our ports. He named Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville, Miami, and New York, New Jersey as 5 ports on the eastern shore that we really need to get to the necessary depth with dredging. Now, he's focused it as a priority, but there's no money behind it right now. So Miami has moved out on their own. They've given the Corps of Engineers millions of dollars in order to start the work. The others were working with OMB and the White House and Congress to figure out how we're going to fund these ports. But the first step is to prioritize, because we have about 700 ports that the Corps works on. But if you're going to prioritize the very low resources that we have, somebody has to prioritize. And if you go to every state, you know what each state would say in terms of priority. So we need really the country to prioritize. So what the president did there is something that hasn't really happened in the recent past, so we're very appreciative of it. Our ports, just to give you an idea, out of the 700 or so ports that we have, we focus our money on the top 60. And the top 60 ports carry about 10 million tons every year. Those top 60 carry 90% of the cargo of the United States. Waterborne cargo goes under those top 60 ports. So all the other ports that we'd love to help out, we'd love to fund, we're just not able to. So we have a real issue in ports around the country that make a difference. A lot of this is getting old. Our levee structures, most of them are over 55 years old. Much of the work that we design has got a design life of 50 years, and it's well into its 60s in terms of age. So part of what we have to do is to keep what we have operational and maintainable for the future. I thought a good way to understand what we're doing is to play a short video so you can understand the importance of what the benefits are of our waterborne. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the work that we do and how important water resources management is to our country. And it's not only important to our country, but it's important to the world. Here, you know, you kind of wonder, does everybody do what we're doing in their country? And the answer is no in terms of water resource management. We are blessed as a nation, and we're just kind of lucky that it turned out this way. But when you look at that Mississippi watershed there in the blue, it's the third largest watershed in the world. The other two are the Congo and the Amazon. But this is the world's largest navigable waterway in the world, 9,000 miles just in that blue area. And then if you go outside it, that brings in another 3,000 miles. So a total of 12,000 miles of navigable waterways in this country. The other thing, it's it provides access to the world's largest agricultural base, a rich agriculture that other nations just don't have. So this just works out perfectly for this country and our economy to take advantage of the great Midwest, all of our farmers, all of the produce, all of the minerals, and other things that move along the Mississippi. It is a unique geopolitical advantage, I think, for our country to maintain this economic opportunity that we've been blessed to have. So I've told you kind of here's what we do, here's why it's important. I've told you what the status of it in terms of grades are. So the question is, with this great challenge, what are we going to do? And how are we going to do it? And who should do it? So I wanted to walk through history just a little bit, and because history will tell us what has happened. It's not always going to be in the same context for us, but there were some grand challenges that the nation went through in the late century, in the 1787 time period up there. I put that up there because what really drove our country to the congressional form of government, in my mind, part of it was this need to build a nation, and build a nation around water and the ability to operate across boundaries. So that whole congressional, continental Congress and how we set up our form of government was focused on how do we build a nation. And then in the War of 1812, we were building fortresses like Fort McHenry. In 1824, an act was passed in Congress that said we're going to have settlers along the Ohio, and we need someone, the Corps of Engineers, first assigned its civil works projects, to make sure that folks could flow along the Ohio, and our settlers could live a life that was just starting to grow in this country. In 1853, the Pacific Railway. We didn't have maps out to the west, but a lot of our topographic engineers, our surveyors, led the country in mapping the west and helping to get railroads to the west. In 1927, we had the great flood along the Mississippi, killed a number of people, damaged millions of homes, and created a sense of urgency in this country that we would see repeated after future disasters like this. One thing I wanted to point out about the Mississippi, this flood in 1927 was replicated probably in grander style in 2011. And most folks don't realize that we had a flood of record proportion in 2011, but we did, and no one died, and we did very well as a nation, and most people don't know it because there wasn't a disaster. But we were thankful for the leaders in 1927, both in the Congress and locally, who said that we needed a Mississippi rivers and tributary system built. And they asked the Corps of Engineers and our local partners to build this system that would be tested for the first time to a level that we've ever seen in 2011. That system is 89% complete. And you kind of, wow, it takes that long for the Corps to get stuff done? Well, not really, but sometimes it does. And I'm going to talk about that, but that's one of the challenges. And it goes back to the priorities that I was talking about. So even to something that important, we're 89% complete, and we've got a lot more work to do. 1933, FDR, landmark New Deal, said we really need to put the country to work. And a lot of that work resulted in the infrastructure that we today rely on, the infrastructure that's well beyond the design life that we built it for, which is 50 years. This is the first edition of the Life magazine. You can see it costs 10 cents there, but that's the Fort Peck Dam. And then after FDR came Eisenhower, and Eisenhower said that we needed an interstate system and a highway system. And leaders throughout, engineers throughout this country helped to build that system between the states. And then down on the bottom right is the Florida Everglades. And the National Environmental Protection Act was about that time, and we became more interested as a nation on environment and what it does for this country, in the importance of us being environmental stewards of the country. When I was the XO to the chief engineers, we went down to the Kissimmee River down there, and we had a straight river, and we were kind of wondering, why is this river straight? Because that's what the people wanted. They wanted to move goods and wanted to move things faster, so we made it straight. Well, today the Corps is putting the bends back into it, because environmentally they want that ecosystem restored, and they see the value of it, and the Corps is helping to put that in. So that happened in the 70s. Of course, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. And again, it awakened America to the need to react and the need to respond, the need to do something differently than we've done. And Hurricane Katrina really set the standard on our engineering practices in terms of reducing risk from hurricane and storm damage. So the question is, where do we go from in the future? Who's going to lead this effort? What's it going to look like so that 50 years from now, when some chief of engineers is standing up here in front of the White House Fellows talking about what this generation did for the next generation in terms of infrastructure that we know is failing, that we have a solution? And it's not all gloom and doom. I think there is hope as we move forward, but there is still a lot of work to be done. I wanted to, since I talked about Katrina, I wanted to talk about how hard this is. This is not just because people don't want to go out and do it. This takes tremendous amount of resources. It takes an understanding of where your priorities are, and it takes real leadership in terms of moving the country in the direction that it needs to move. I wanted to do a before and after, since we talked about Katrina. But I talked about the Mississippi. It was about 89% complete. The system we were supposed to build in the Katrina area, we were authorized to build that in 1965. So in 2005, when Katrina hit, it was about 50% complete. And you'll say, well, why is that? Today, I have about $60 billion worth of work that the Congress has authorized. Told me to get after it, go out and do it. Sort of like this, sort of like the Mississippi River and tributary system. I receive about $1.5 billion each year to do that work. So you'll like peanut butter, right? It's like spreading peanut butter, and you kind of run out after a while, but you try to cover as much as you can. And if somebody tells you the priorities, then you'll put a little bit more peanut butter over here, but that's kind of how it works. And the Corps makes no decisions on that. We execute what we're authorized to execute, and we appropriate whatever's appropriated, then we'll put those dollars against it. And since we don't have the earmarks anymore, it's really difficult for the members to kind of say, put money here on this project that I see as important. So we work to help the OMB and the Congress and the President to, from an engineering standpoint, offer what we think is most in need. On the left, you can see this is we had about 7-foot waves in a 18-foot storm surge, so about 25 feet of water coming at the levees that were about 12 feet. That's what was happening in Katrina. So the levees failed, they overtopped. We had real issues in design and construction. What you see on the right is one of the marvels of engineering. This is the storm surge barrier. This is 26 feet above water. It's got it goes down about 144 feet in terms of the piers. It's got 3 gates. It's an amazing feat of engineering. It costs about $14 billion, not just for that. It costs about $14 billion for the entire protection system. We got it all done in about 6 years. So Congress gave us a whole jar of peanut butter, said put it right there and get it done. So the moral of the story, I think, we invested $130 billion after Katrina as a nation. So if we knew this was coming, this is predicting the future. If you had a crystal ball, but if you knew it was coming, anywhere along those 50 years, if Congress told us to build a $14 billion system, we would have built it, and what happened in Katrina would not have happened. That's the challenge that we face. It's a lack of resources, it's a lack of priorities, and we're doing the darndest that we can to try to identify the risk as best we can so that decision makers can make the kind of decisions that are necessary. Hurricane Sandy, this is a picture of the New Jersey coast, because I was meeting with Governor Christie, and he wanted to understand something about core projects. And you can see on the bottom there, in what you're seeing, let me focus on the left side there. That's the New Jersey coast, 137 miles of coastline. Where you see red is a project that Congress authorized, but we haven't done anything with it because I don't have any money. And you can see what happened on the bottom right, where there's a project that had nothing in front of it. The yellow means we had the project and we constructed it, and 30 miles apart, you can see that the homes, the city, everything survived. So Governor Christie said, so why is it that I don't have this money? And I explained the whole thing about Katrina and disasters, and we respond well to disasters. So he started saying, I want my Katrina money. I want my post-Katrina money. And they got $60 billion between New York and New Jersey. This won't cost us nearly $60 billion. Our share is about $5 billion. So again, the same kind of analogy of what you saw before. $60 billion to recover, $5 billion comes to the core. Had we had that, we would have protected a lot of folks. But a gentleman was telling me he's from Sacramento. We got the same issues out there, so this is the challenge. Where in the country do you go? Who sets the priorities? How much money do you invest, and where do you invest it? I did want to talk a little bit about Superstorm Sandy. This was, in my mind, I've worked with a number of disasters. This was probably one of the best responses to a disaster that I've ever seen. From the president on down through the governors, to the local officials, there was absolute leadership and involvement and guidance given. So, in fact, the president was in a meeting with us, and he was going to bring the governors on, but before the governors came on, he said, okay, if you have 15 minutes, or he said you have 30 minutes to respond to a governor if they call. If they call, 30 minutes, I want an answer. And then we did the VTC, Governor Christie, Mayor Bloomberg, and Governor Cuomo got off, and he said, I changed my mind. You have 15 minutes to get back to the governor. And then he said, and if they call the White House, guess what? You're in trouble. Governor Cuomo had me on speed dial to the White House. I mean, no kidding, he called the White House like every other day. I mean, we were good with Governor Christie, but with Governor Cuomo, and a lot of this came down to communications, and we worked our way through it. Some of the communications I remember, I was talking to my aide one day. We were coming out, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and he said, hey, sir, have you read the email from the White House? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, it was an email from New York, but it hit the White House, and it should be in your inbox. And I said, I read everything. I got up at 4:30 this morning, I read everything in the email, and I didn't see anything. And he shows me this email. It's got my name on it. And it says, get Bostick and the GD Corps of Engineers out of New York before they screw something else up. And I said, okay, I think they're mad. And I said, why didn't I get this email? So we went up and we got it all fixed and everything. And I said, go figure out why I didn't get this email. And our IT guys came in, and they said, sir, the chief engineer gets a lot of hate mail. You probably don't know that because we got all these filters on. So we don't let that kind of stuff come through. And I said, okay, we're dealing with upset people in New York. Remove the filters. Okay. But communications is important in a lot of different ways, and we found that out. So everything's kind of coming through to me right now. But in Sandy, to give you an idea, 485 million gallons of water we took out of the subways, the tunnels, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, 85 million gallons of water. The longest vehicular tunnel in North America, 85 million gallons. We emptied it in 9 days. That's the Rose Bowl filled from top to bottom. Amazing. And we had never done that. We hadn't done that. In fact, they said, who's going to do this? And everybody stepped back except the Corps, and there was no place to move. We didn't even have the right pumps. In fact, that's why Governor Cuomo was a little upset, because this is all still non-attribution, right? Yeah. So you got it on videotape, though. But I can tell this story because I've talked to Governor Cuomo about this. But anyway, one day we were, the mayor, I don't know if you know, but New York City and New York State, there's a little bit of this going on. So we had Mayor Bloomberg there, and we had Governor Cuomo here, and Bloomberg said, I want you to empty the underpass by the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Empty that underpass. He wasn't worried about the the tunnel that went to New Jersey. And but Cuomo was. So Cuomo said that's the number one priority. Well, we work for the governors, but Bloomberg's a pretty powerful guy, and most of New York City is where the problems were. Well, we had these pumps. We needed high head pumps that could take water 150 foot up from the base of the tunnel. We didn't have those for the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which was Cuomo's priority. We had these little dinky pumps, so we wanted to show we were doing some work. So we got to that Brooklyn underpass, and we just started pumping that water. Well, Governor Cuomo comes by. He knows that's Mayor Bloomberg's number one priority, and that was one of the calls to the White House. I mean, it was, and we had to explain what a high-head pump was, and we finally got the high-headed pump in 9 days, and it was the Coast Guard, God bless those guys, and the Navy, the Mass Transit Authority and the Corps kind of working as a team, and they did what everybody thought would take months. They did in 9 days. So some real heroes. A lot of work in electricity. Yeah, thank you. And a lot of folks say that we work slowly. I mean, things do take time, but this next slide kind of shows you how fast things can happen. If you look up here, this is pre-Sandy. This is along the New Jersey coast. Anybody know where this is? Manlokan? Yeah, this is one of those barrier islands that people don't build on. But it's nice to live, near the water. So this thing's all built out. This is a bridge, and after Sandy hit, this kind of tore right through this. This is water. This is ocean, kind of running all through there. There's one house here. I don't know if you can see it. The one house is still there. So when we rebuilt this thing, and this is, look, 6 days, built the road back. There's that house I said, it's still standing. Had to rebuild the bridge. And this is, about 30 days later, we got the road, bridge. This is the beach, this beach renourishment. This is a project for the Corps. When you have sand going out here like this, that gives you, that helps slow down that storm that's coming through. That beach slows down the storm that's coming through. So does the barrier island. So does the marshlands that are out there. So all of it's important. So this is kind of where I was going to end, and just open it up for questions. But talk about some of the things that need to be done. I've stated really the challenge that we have. I stated the importance of our inland waterways and what it does for our economy, some of the risks that you can see, and how well we respond to disasters as a nation. So the question is, how do we do what we do during disasters, during a time when we don't see the disaster coming? One of the things is the Water Resource Reform and Development Act. I want to read something from Chairman Schuster is in charge up there of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. This is from his committee, and I don't know if anyone tracks this, but we did have a vote out of the House of Representatives. It was overwhelming last week, and it was 417 to 3. And what they voted on, they approved a bipartisan water resources reform legislation that cuts federal red tape, bureaucracy, streamlines the infrastructure project delivery process, fosters fiscal responsibility, and strengthens our water transportation network to promote America's competitiveness, prosperity, and economic growth. So that's good news. I mean, that's just this week, but we haven't had news like that for a long, long time. So the fact that as difficult it is in this town, that's something that we can be thankful for, that they recognize this is a challenge and that we have to do something differently than we're doing now. I talked about national priorities. We need someone to set the national priorities. I want to just read a couple things from, hearing the president. And, I listened to the president when he was at and I'm not knocking the president. I'm in uniform. I'm not doing that. I'm a big supporter. He's my boss. I'm just trying to show you how his views have changed over time. And I don't know what's caused those views to change. I have some ideas. But I was watching the Democratic National Convention, and he was talking about our infrastructure, and he said, we really got to fix our roads, our bridges, our schools, and our runways. And that's true, but I was just, come on, the water resources, the ports, and yeah. So then, he was at the State of the Union, and he said, modern ports move our goods. So when the president says that, I mean, stuff happens. It really starts happening, I mean, we may not get very far as we're fighting in this town to make things happen, but it's got to start at the top. And then he was at the President's Export Council. He says, whether or not we can continue to use barges to move a lot of product out of the American heartland to ports around the world, that's going to depend on our infrastructure. So we are, between the executive branch, the legislative branch, what we're trying to do in the Corps, what our partners are trying to do, because I was really believed that I was drug into the White House on the rock pinnacles when the Mississippi was down, because it was the industrial base, the folks it was the farmers, it was the barge traffickers saying, we are losing money. Our economy depends on the inland waterway, and we need somebody to recognize that it's important. I think if you went around the country and talked to most Americans, they'd have no clue of what we've just talked about here, nor the importance of our inland waterways, because they don't drive on them, they don't cross them, they don't fly them, but they benefit from them in a big way. So part of what we hope we've done today is that give you some background, and if you're ever near a Corps project, you know, we get 370 million visits a year. We have more visitors than anybody in the nation. I think Disney contests us a little bit, but in terms of federal, we have more visitors than anyone, and we're just trying to get the word out. We want to make sure that people understand the gravity of the situation that we face, and the time is now that we do something for the next generation. That's all I had. I'm happy to take questions.
Tom, I'm Randy Jane from the class of 73, 74, and while we reside at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi in St. Louis, I've got a different peanut butter question for you. I will compliment you, having lived through in St. Louis the flood of '93 and then the flood of 2011. That was two different worlds, you know, in terms of how much easier it was.
Absolutely.
8 years later. My question is, as a Southwest Florida beach bum, we're in our third or fourth year of unprecedented fish kills, mammal kills, bird kills from water flowing west out of the Everglades in an unprecedented fashion, with all of the agricultural phosphates and things polluting the Gulf Coast. And this is apparently a result of, I guess, agricultural buildup south of the Everglades and water not flowing south. Is this one on your peanut butter list?
Well, the Everglades is huge. I mean, it's a huge project for us, and we're working it. The thing I always say is, you know, the Congress tells us what to do. They authorize projects. I don't come up with projects on my own and say this is what I think's best for the country. I do provide my best engineering advice, and we've got great scientists and engineers that are involved in those discussions. But ultimately, it needs to be OMB and the Congress. It says, and they don't come up with it on their own either. I think what happens is at the local level, they decide impacts that you're feeling, and they come up to the national level, and they say the priority for ecosystem restoration may be more important than flood risk management. It may be more important than navigation, and what I'm talking about here. And that's really the challenge, to get the local and the national government, non-governmental leaders together to decide what should we prioritize. Someone's going to lose, generally. It's not necessarily going to be a win-win situation, and we try to make them win-win, but they're not all. But it is on my plate. Yes?
My name is Priscilla Douglas. I'm the class of 81, 82. And I wonder, what's the next technology regarding dams, particularly in light of, you know, Superstorm Sandy and the fact that all of lower Manhattan was flooded?
Yeah. I think you're talking inland waterway dams.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of our dams are in very bad shape. So I think what we're going to see, Wolf Creek Dam, we just redid Wolf Creek Dam, and learning the technology of taking dams as they are and making them the kind of dams that can live another 50 years with additional strengthening of piers, deeper, stronger anchors. It's those sort of things that we're looking at now, because we're not going to be able to build new, but a lot of these projects can last for well over 100 years if they're designed properly and they're reinforced. So much of the work is focused on how do we reinforce, how do we better anchor, and then how do we better assess risk so that we can prioritize the dollars that we have. The Corps has developed a risk management center, a center that only does risk management. And it was set up after Katrina so that they could go around the country, and one of the areas they're focused on are dams. So we've prioritized our dams, given them a ranking, and right now we're focused on rehabilitating those that are most at risk.
So, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. What I understand is what Mayor Bloomberg is talking about is a whole new system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we're working very closely with the mayor and his team. We were just up there about a couple months ago, and he's looking for something similar to a storm surge barrier in certain areas. And New York City in that area is far different than an area like New Orleans. What works in New Orleans may or may not work up in New York. So we're working very closely with them. One of the items out of this $5 billion that Congress gave to us is to look at do a comprehensive review of how do we address and adapt to climate change, how do we build resiliency in the Northeast, and we're doing that in parallel with Mayor Bloomberg. He doesn't want to get too far out in front of what the government's doing, and we don't want to get out in front of him, so we're working together.
General Bostick, my name is Albert Cho. I'm from the class of 2011 and recently wrapped up my time at the State Department. Your speech was, I think, particularly interesting for me because I now lead corporate strategy for Xylem, which is the world's largest pure-play water technology company. We're active in water transport treatment and testing, and actually produced some of the high head pumps that were used in Sandy recovery.
Thank you.
I owe
you big time.
So, my question for you is, I'm trying to reframe our corporate strategy and part around the concept of resilience and building resilience in communities through investing in smarter and more robust water infrastructure. One of the challenges we face is that people like to spend money after disasters to react to them. They don't like to make investments before they happen because they don't experience those risks as something that affects their day-to-day life. So I guess my question to you is, given that there's a big deficit in the amount of money that's available to make investments in resilient urban infrastructure around water, what can those of us who are in industry do to support efforts around public education and outreach that might create resource availability for the people that you work with every day in the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, you're looking for the Holy Grail. No, and I'm looking for it too. I work a lot with the international communities, whether it's Japan or Korea, Eastern Europe, and other countries in Africa that have this same challenge of we really don't respond until after a disaster because the resources are so low, and we are not good at the risk assessment to identify and prioritize those areas of highest risk. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we work together in terms of our ability to identify risk, educate folks on that risk, and then really prioritize, because we're going to have to leave some areas uncovered. We can't cover everything. So how do we prioritize for the country? And that's why I felt what the President did, at least with the ports, is the kind of decisions that we need in other parts of the country, because no senator or governor or congressman is going to really vote for another priority. I mean, their priority is most important to their constituents, as it should be. And there are some national level priorities that only come to fruition after a disaster. So I think it's education, risk mitigation, and working together.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Chin, class of 78, 79. You make me proud to be an engineer.
Ooh, Esseons.
I was on the board of CH Tomb Hill, and we worked with you closely for Katrina. So we know we're going to have these disasters. We know we need the funding. How much can we try to use public-private partnerships or infrastructure funds to try to get this funding we need?
I think we absolutely have to figure this out. I was just in a meeting with some CEOs earlier today, and I'm going to meet with a group of them next week. The government really cannot fund this. Even if you laid out your highest priorities, the government cannot do this alone. and the states cannot do it alone. It's going to take public-private partnership. We've done this in the past with the Residential Communities Initiative. If you go onto an installation, Army installation, Air Force installation, military installation, you'll see the best housing in the world. If we had to do that, we as a military, we would not do that, but we worked a public-private partnership. We had to get a law that allowed us to do it. And really, we need the authorities from Congress that allow a little bit more flexibility in our ability to do public-private partnerships. You know, for the rec centers, I mean, I told you, we have all these rec centers in 43 states, over 400 recreation centers. We worked a deal at a local level, and we worked a deal at a local level they would get money, the Corps would get money for having guys dock their boats, and for some of the recreation service, they pumped that money back into the work that was happening. And that was all going well until we found out we were violating the law. So we had to bring all that back in. But we need the authorities, and we need the good ideas. And what I would tell you is, if you're working with DOD, we're not deal makers. We don't know how to make these deals. We don't know how to think of them. We know that we have this opportunity, and we know that somebody could probably get between us and somebody that can make money off of this and craft a deal that would be doable. The other thing I think is not going to be win-win. Even with the housing, the RCI housing I talked about, we're paying for that. The soldiers' normal housing allowance is going into that housing deal. In the past, we just didn't pay for it. Maintenance went down, the housing got bad, the painting started peeling, the roof started leaking, and we kept shooting on the ranges because we didn't want to invest in our housing. Well, now we have to, because we have this deal. But so we're losing a little bit on that money that we're given, but we're gaining big time on our recruiting, our retention, and other things that are not directly related to the deal at hand. But we're not good at this. So I'm looking for folks that can really help us look at what we've got and say, you know, we think private industry can help you with that, do it better, and here's what you need to do for private industry. But I think it's something we have to do in the future. Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello, General. My name is Alan Lord, and I have a question just in a statement that you said that sounded very interesting. During the Sandy, you said that the White House had contacted you earlier, or right when Sandy was happening, and you were told to be on standby waiting for that call from the governor. In Katrina's situation, was that same type of order given to you, and it just didn't come, or
Well,
it came
yeah,
later?
let me clarify. We know when a disaster is coming. I mean, we got a few days out, so we kind of know it, and we're kind of in the get-ready position. We got folks moving forward. We have shelters for them. We have water moving forward, food. So that happens in any disaster, including Katrina. What I was talking about was the president got personally involved in this particular one, and it wasn't before, I'm not sure exactly when it happened. It was after the disaster that he called in FEMA and the rest of us, and he just said that if the governor calls, I want you to respond very quickly. He didn't really need to say that, but I think the fact that he said that made it a priority at the highest levels.
But isn't it the law that you have to wait to make your movement?
I do. I only do what the governor asked me to do.
Exactly. Did the governor not call you in the Katrina situation as quickly as?
Well, here's how it works. Again, this is kind of, inside baseball here. Every politician, every governor wants to do things on their own. And as long as they can get it done on their own, they're going to do it on their own. There are some people they need help from, and they'll ask them to do this or do that. But generally, if they've got the resources, this is kind of a little facetious, but I went up to see Mayor Bloomberg, and I sat down, and he said he wanted to have lunch. So I ordered a cup of coffee, and he ordered burnt toast. And I thought this was a delicacy, and he had a piece of black toast show up, and he put butter on it and jam. He cut it up, and he started eating these perfectly squares. And I said, hey, Governor or Mayor, I've got a lot of pumps. I want to help you with your pumps. He said, General Bostick, I get a lot of pumps. I don't need help with pumps. I said, okay. Well, I got a lot of generators. You're going to need a lot of help with generators. You really don't understand how much. I got a lot of generators, General Bostick. I don't need help with generators. I said, okay, well, Hurricane Katrina, 26 million tons of trash. You are going to need help with trash, and we're going to help you move that trash. You know, I move about 11 million tons of trash all the time, so I got the trash. He says, how's your family doing? How's my family doing? And we started talking about my family. And anyway, he said, hey, pick up the tab for these guys. And I said, yeah, a cup of coffee, man. So anyway, he left. And then his chief of staff grabbed me. He says, hey, General Bostick, we need all of that help. We need all of that help and then some. We just don't want you running around in a uniform, you know, 3-star general, you in charge, and you got this. And he said, we'll call you when you need it, but we need that help. He says, I'm going to go talk to the mayor. But we're, you know, so what I'm saying is, and you can't hold out too long. You can't wait too long. Because if you wait too long, then you can get overwhelmed. And I think that's what happened. I don't know the details of what happened in Katrina, but you try to do it as long as you can, and then if you can't, you got to figure out when to ask for help.
Thank you.
I think they were a little late in Katrina. Yeah.
General, I'm Paul Applegarth, class of 81, 82. In terms of public-private partnerships, examples and ideas, I don't know if you've looked offshore, but I and my colleagues have probably done several $1 billion of public-private infrastructure in Asia, and I set up a fund of $500 million for sub-Saharan Africa. So examples do exist where you can work together with the public-private sector. I'm glad to give you some more ideas, but there's ways to do it. You're right, you need legislation, and you also need some people who are focused on it, but the examples really are there to do it.
You know, I heard someone say this earlier in this group of CEOs I was with, and I'd be happy to meet with you. I really would like to meet with you. But one of the things that struck me, he said we've done 600 public-private partnerships in our company all over the world, 5 of them in the U.S. So we obviously have some issues that we've got to get resolved because there are people like you that have done them and want to do them, but we make it so hard here that it's not possible to do. But this is our future. We have to figure this out, public-private partnership, and I'm committed in the Corps of Engineers to do what we can to help sort through it, but look forward to meeting with you. Sir.
General, I'm Walt Human from the class of 1966-67. I'd like to tell you a story about Texas. We prioritized $100 billion in highway projects. Our highway department is going bankrupt. The legislature, in its wisdom, allocated $800 million, but they just need $4 billion to break even. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because you're going to be meeting with some CEOs next week, and you've just met with them. And it seems to me that the business community has got to step forward and not speak with out of both sides of their mouth. We sit in quiet sessions of CEOs, and what we do is we lament the big government, and we lament paying any additional taxes. And at the same time, we look at your numbers and what the Urban Land Institute has said, and this nation, which used to be at the pinnacle of infrastructure planning and funding, is now in the doldrums. Our federal fund is lacking, is running at a deficit of $5 to $6 billion a year. Texas is the same way, and it must be in other states. So may I respectfully suggest that when you meet with the CEOs, just say you ought to talk with some other people candidly about what their advice is privately. And their advice would be raise the taxes. Raise the taxes and try to get this thing done because we're in bad shape as a nation. And we have all these planning conferences and prioritizing and so forth, but we don't address the fundamental question. How's it going to be paid for?
No, great point, great point. I'd be happy to take you with me.
Tom Earl Walker, as you know, what year am I? 80, 81. So you and I talked about this, right? About this fellowship. So when are we going to get another Corps of Engineers officer to apply for the White House Fellowship?
Yeah, what Earl's saying is, I first thought about the fellowship. I was teaching at West Point, and I went in, and Earl talked to me about what it took to be a White House Fellow, and I left the room convinced I couldn't qualify. You know, I couldn't get that. And then I got encouraged by Bruce Scott and others a couple years later to apply. So I'm very thankful that I did and for this opportunity. One of the things that we are very concerned about is, and I was the head of personnel for the Army for almost 3 years, and before that I was the head recruit of the Army. So I spent a lot of time in engineering, but I spent a lot of time worrying about people and worrying about talent management. And this is one of those areas. We in our Army have so focused the last 12 years on fighting this war that the kind of opportunities and skills and broadening assignments and jobs that I enjoyed growing up, and others like you, Earl, they don't exist for our officers. They've been to multiple deployments. They've bypassed on going to grad school in some cases. They haven't had the opportunity to compete. In fact, they haven't thought it was worth competing. It wasn't something that would help, that the Army aspired to. And our boards were demonstrating that in terms of who we picked as the next leaders. So this is a ship that we're trying to turn. I will tell you that we have been so involved at my level that I asked the head of our personnel command to give me the top 25 captains in the branch. And I'm going to have my generals call these captains and encourage them to apply for an Olmsted Scholarship, a White House Fellowship. So I called the first guy. He was at the NTC, young captain. I think he fainted when I said who I was. But I said, you need to apply. And he said, well, my grades weren't there. I said, hey, get in there. Don't worry about that. You're one of the best that the Army's recognized, so you need to apply. And we've had some success, but we still need to work it. The other thing that I'm very concerned about in the Corps of Engineers is just our engineer talent. And where this country is going in science, technology, engineering, and math. Out of 100 college graduates, 4 will be engineers. 4 will be engineers. That puts us in the bottom 14 in the world. We're in there with Bangladesh, Cuba, and Cambodia. Those are our partners in terms of producing engineers. Then if you look at science, technology, engineering, math, you get 100 STEM graduates. 10 are going to be women. 10 are going to be women. 5 are going to be African American, and 5 are going to be Hispanic. When I went to the Corps of Engineers, the chief engineer, the chief and the vice got me and said, hey, you need to work on diversity in the Corps. The Corps is not very diverse. So I go over there, there's 29 GOs, I'm it. And I thought, I never thought about this until I became chief of engineers. But I went back and I looked and I said, okay, how did I get here? And I started at graduation. I said, when I graduated, how many African Americans went engineers? I'm it. From my class, we had 100, and I'm it. And then I said, well, how many went in the 4 years that I went? This is the greatest engineering institution in the world, I think. How many? 3. And 1 got out. So then I looked at all my district commanders, and I have, right below me, I got these district commanders that are doing all this work out there, 35 of them. No one. I mean, nothing. No female, no minority. So then I went to the captain list I talked about. When I called those captains, out of the 25 captains, there was 1 female and 1 African American. So then I went to West Point, and I was welcoming the 127 cadets that were coming into the Corps of Engineers. 2 African Americans. So we got an issue with just engineers. We got an issue with STEM. We have an issue with diversity. So this is something. I'm working on. If they graduate now, 25 years, I'm working on like 2044. I'm working on getting that cohort right, because the last one, we got a lot of work to do. So when you look at it from that perspective, that's a long answer to your question, but this is one I am really focused on, trying to do whatever I can to help out. Yes?
So I'm Margarita Comunar's class of 91. I'm sad to report that when I went to engineering school at Stanford, I was the only female Hispanic.
We only had one female in my Stanford engineering
Yeah.
as well. So.
Things
But I
are
think
changing.
they're doing, yeah, things are getting better.
But slowly.
Yeah.
Slowly. I know you talked a little bit about the many initiatives that you have, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your initiatives and sustainability, microgrids, this push towards energy independence, resilience, et cetera. I know that there's an initiative for the military in general, but I didn't know how it applied specifically to you.
Right. We're working in this area very, very hard, the whole energy sustainability, and how do we become better stewards of the energy that we have? How do we create cleaner energy? So we, last year, did a $7 billion multiple award task order, and we're starting to bring the people in that are going to compete for different thermal, solar, biomass type contracts that we are trying to put on our installations so that we can ensure that we will always have the ability to provide our electricity. We're looking at water. So this is a big area. We have a Assistant Secretary of the Army that is leading this effort, Secretary Hammack, and she is one of the experts in this energy sustainability. So we got a long way to go in this area, but we are very focused on it. If you go to our installations after any type of construction or during any construction, we're looking to make them environmentally friendly, and we're looking for payback out of any of the structures that we build to make sure environmentally and energy-wise they're conscious of the importance of those areas.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
We're so honored to have you here, to be one of our alums of whom we're proudest. And we thank you for the leadership you're bringing to the Corps, which is so core to the nation and to all of our futures. And thank you to your wonderful team, Dr. White and others. It's been great working with you.
Thank you.